the coronation will see 74-year-old King Charles III crowned in front of 2,200 invited guests from across the political, royal and celebrity worlds. Now, to give us a brief summary on the history and events leading up to the ceremony, we're joined on Zoom by Professor Donal McCracken. He is Emeritus Professor, History Studies at UKZN. Professor, a very good morning to you. A warm welcome to Morning Live. I mean, you've lectured on the royals, met Prince Philip as well. Share with us the history leading up to this day.
Good morning to you. Thank you for having me along. I don't know whether it's a good thing to ask an Irishman to talk about the English royal family and their coronation, but I'll try my best. England has had a monarchy going back well over 1,000 years, and King Charles is the latest of those monarchs. There have been 6 dynasties ruling England. By dynasties, I mean royal families, different families. So the spread of 1,000 years is not a continuity. There is breakup. And indeed, the ceremony that we're going to see today is an odd mixture. It's a hodgepodge of things that were basically invented in the Victorian era or sort of given to us as ancient things, and genuinely ancient things. And similarly, the regalia that is used, you know, the crowns, the controversial crown that your colleague was talking about a few minutes ago with the Cullinan Diamond, the regalia basically only dates from 1661, because twice England has lost her crown jewels. One was when in East Anglia, during the reign of King John in the 13th century, when basically the sea came in and swamped the wagons that held the crown and all that went with it, and they were destroyed. But then in the 1640s, England had a civil war. England had a revolution. People forget that England has had a revolution, like America had a revolution later. And one of the things the leader of that revolution, Oliver Cromwell, did was to destroy the regalia of monarchy. And they had a republic for about a dozen years, and it didn't really work. People didn't like it. It was very Puritan, and people thought there wasn't much fun. So in 1661, they brought back the king, and they reinvented the regalia. So a lot of the stuff that you see there, like the orb and the scepter, and indeed the crown, are I say only 360 years old. But there's one item that you must look out for this afternoon during the ceremony, and of course it is basically a religious ceremony. Is the spoon of anointment. The king will be anointed with holy oils, going back to the old times when there was a belief in the divine right of kings, that kings and God were not quite one and the same thing, but they were very close to each other. And the anointment is really the key moment in the crowning. And the spoon in which the oil is put for that is part of the original regalia, which goes way back to, allegedly, to Edward the Confessor, who was around the sort of the early 11th century, before 1066. And in 1661, when it was when the royal jewels were all broken up and sold for profit, that spoon was bought by a chap for 16 shillings, and he kept it. And when when the new monarch came back later, he gave it back to the king. So it is the oldest thing. And the other thing that is ancient is the chair in which the king will sit when he's crowned. And of course, there's controversial stone of Scone in which he sits, which the Scots want back. There's quite a lot of controversy about items that will be on display today. I suppose the stone of Scone, the great stone that was taken down from Scotland to England in whatever it was, 1296, is probably the most controversial. But there are other ones, and as you know, South Africa is would quite like its Cullinan Diamond.
Yeah, and the other thing as well that we also have to touch on it, the St. Edward's crown, which is a big part of what is going to happen today.
Yeah, the Edward, there are several crowns, and you can get very confused about which crown is what and they're using. And they're given their due. They have tried to be diplomatic. The most controversial of the diamonds is actually an Indian diamond, which was basically looted, the Kohinoor, and they're not using that. But there are several of the Cullinan diamonds. Now, the Cullinan diamond came out of the Premier Mine in 1903, and it looked like a block of butter, you know, like a pound of butter, like half a kilo of butter.
Yeah.
And it had to be cut up. And it was cut up into 9 major stones, and then there were lots. There were about 1,000 or 100 rather, not 1,000, smaller stones. And it's those 9 stones, and they call them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Several of those will be on display today. I think Cullinan 2, 3, and 4 will be on display. They they were actually a commercial item. They were sold and then donated. Louis Botha, who was Prime Minister at the time in the old Transvaal state or colony, thought it would be a good idea to give it to the king as a gesture of reconciliation, because you're just after the Boer War, the Anglo-Boer War at that stage. And they bought it. It was unsold for about 2 years. And finally, they bought it for £150,000. The Treasury in the Transvaal immediately slapped on a 60% tax onto it. So in actual fact, the Treasury got it at bargain basement price because they got 60% of it back. So it only cost them 40%. And the British were very reluctant about the whole thing. The Prime Minister, he didn't really like the idea. And he said, well, let the king decide. Let Edward VII decide. And the king, of course, I mean, as anyone would who was offered the best diamond in the world, said, well, yes, thank you very much, and took it. So the provenance of the stone is slightly different from something like the Kohinoor, which you know comes from India in the 1850s.
And Prof, I mean, King Charles has been waiting for over 70 years to get to this point. What does it essentially mean to him personally to be, crowned king at this age?
Well, it's an extraordinary thing. It's a rather sad saga. It's something of a tragedy in some respects, in that here was a chap. He was a boy. He was born in 1948. His mother comes to the throne only because of the so-called scandal around the divorce and the new King Edward VII having to abdicate. So she didn't, she wasn't born to be queen. When he was born, he was the heir apparent. So all his life, he's been training. It's been an apprenticeship. And years and years and decades and decades. I don't know what that does to one's psyche, to one's mental health, but 70 years of preparation, the longest preparation certainly in British history. And of course he's 75 now. So it's not a young man coming in like she was a young woman coming in at the age, whatever she was, 20 in 1953. And so he's had all the benefits of knowing how the British state operates. And of course, the British state is different from the South African state in that it has a figurehead as head of state. In South Africa, like in the United States of America, we've got an executive head of state who combines the role of a prime minister and a leader with that of being a ceremonial leader. Now, the English system, and indeed the Irish system, I mean, the Irish have got a president that's elected every 8 years, but who is a head of state. They're meant to be above politics. They're meant to be a figurehead. They're meant to unite the nation. Yeah. Look, I'm sure he'll do a competent job. I think there will be change. I think he will change matters.
All right. Prof, thank you so much for talking to us. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but thank you so much for that informative conversation. Britain's King Charles III will be crowned 8 months after he ascended to the throne following the death of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, last September.